A single black mom becomes a physical therapist for a paraplegic millionaire, healing not just his body, but his heart. When betrayal, revenge, and danger close in, love and courage will be their only hope for survival. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Nathan Crawford stood at the window of his penthouse office, looking down at the city below. At 38 years old, he had everything money could buy, but something felt wrong. His company, Crawford Energy Solutions, was about to merge with Vandertech Industries, and his fiancée Catherine wouldn't take no for an answer. The board meeting starts in 20 minutes, his secretary reminded him through the intercom. Miss Vanderbilt is already waiting in the conference room. Nathan sighed and adjusted his tie. Catherine had been pushing for this merger for months, but the numbers didn't add up. Something about Vandertech's proposals seemed suspicious, like they were hiding toxic assets. When he entered the conference room, Catherine was there in her designer suit, perfect blonde hair and red lipstick. She rushed to kiss him, but her eyes were cold. "Darling, everything is ready for the signing," she said, touching his arm. "Daddy's lawyers have all the paperwork prepared." Nathan pulled away. "I've been looking at the reports again, Catherine. These numbers don't make sense. I think we need to postpone." "Postpone?" Catherine's voice turned sharp. "Do you know how many strings I had to pull to make this happen? The press is already here. I don't care about the press. This is about protecting thousands of jobs." Nathan grabbed his coat. "I need to check something at our research facility. There are documents there that might prove—" "You're being paranoid." Catherine blocked his path. "Where are you going?" "To get the truth." Nathan pushed past her. "Use my helicopter, it'll be faster," she called after him, her smile not reaching her eyes. The company helicopter waited on the rooftop. Nathan didn't notice how Catherine immediately got on her phone, or how the maintenance crew exchanged worried looks. 20 minutes into the flight, Nathan was reviewing files on his tablet when the helicopter started shaking violently. "Something's wrong with the controls!" the pilot shouted. The last thing Nathan remembered was the ground rushing up to meet them, the screech of metal, and then darkness. He woke up in the hospital 3 days later. His whole body felt numb. Dr. James Harrison, the top neurosurgeon in the city, stood at the foot of his bed with Catherine and Nathan's cousin Richard. "The damage to your spine was severe," Dr. Harrison said gravely. "You'll never walk again." Catherine's face crumpled in fake tears. "Oh, darling, this is terrible. How will you run the company now?" Richard put his hand on Catherine's shoulder. "Don't worry, cousin. We'll take care of everything while you focus on recovery." But Nathan saw the look that passed between them. In that moment, he knew this was no accident. His helicopter had been sabotaged, and the two people he trusted most were behind it. The next few weeks were a blur of pain and humiliation. Catherine made sure photographers captured her devoted visits, but she barely touched him. She started talking about him in the past tense, like he was already gone. "It's just so tragic," he overheard her tell a reporter. "He's just a shell of the man I loved." Physical therapists came and went. None of them could handle Catherine's constant interference or Richard's demands for quick results. Nathan sank deeper into depression, trapped in his own useless body while his company slipped away. Then Sarah Mitchell walked into his room. She wasn't what anyone expected. A young black woman in simple clothes, with her 8-year-old daughter Emily holding her hand. Catherine took one look at them and sneered. "This is the best they could find?" she asked Dr. Harrison. "Some woman from the wrong side of town?" But Sarah ignored the insult. She walked straight to Nathan's bed and looked him in the eye. "Mr. Crawford, I'm Sarah Mitchell. I've reviewed your case, and I believe you can do better than this, much better." Emily smiled and waved at him. "Hi, Mr. Crawford. Mama's the best at helping people get strong again." For the first time since the crash, Nathan felt something stir inside him. Not hope exactly, but a spark of curiosity about this. A woman who dared to stand up to Catherine Vanderbilt. "I've studied traditional healing methods passed down through my family," Sarah explained. "Combined with modern physical therapy, I've had success with cases others gave up on." "This is ridiculous," Catherine snapped. "We need real medical professionals, not folk remedies." But Nathan raised his hand weakly. "When can you start?" Sarah's eyes met his, warm and determined. "Right now, if you're ready." And that was how it began. Neither of them knew they were starting a journey that would change both their lives forever. While Catherine plotted in boardrooms and Richard schemed with corrupt doctors, love was about to bloom in the most unexpected place, brought to life by the healing hands of a woman who saw past Nathan's wealth to the broken man who needed saving. Little Emily sat in the corner, drawing pictures and singing softly, while her mother began the first exercises. Outside the window, storm clouds gathered, but inside that hospital room, the first rays of hope were finally breaking through. Catherine Vanderbilt was furious. She paced back and forth in Dr. Harrison's private office, her high heels clicking against the expensive marble floor. "How dare he hire that woman?" she snapped. "Do you know what people will say when they find out Nathan Crawford is being treated by some nobody from the mountains?" Dr. Harrison adjusted his glasses nervously. "Miss Vanderbilt, I tried to discourage him, but try harder." Catherine slammed her hand on his desk. "I'm not paying you to let some backwoods therapist ruin our plans. That accident was supposed to keep Nathan dependent on us." The doctor glanced at the door, making sure no one could hear them. "The money you deposited in my offshore account was very generous, but this Sarah Mitchell, she has an impressive track record." "Then destroy it." Catherine's voice was cold. "Call the medical board. Question her credentials. I don't care what you do, just get rid of her." Meanwhile, in Nathan's private hospital suite, Sarah was starting her first real therapy session. She had brought fresh herbs that filled the room with a clean, natural scent. "My grandmother taught me about these," she explained as she mixed them into a healing salve. She was known throughout the mountains for her healing touch. Emily looked up from her coloring book. Grandma Rose could fix anything, even Mr. Johnson's leg after the mine accident, when all the doctors said he'd never walk. Nathan watched as Sarah worked the salve into his legs with strong, sure hands. Her touch was different from the other therapists, gentler but somehow more determined. "Why are you really here?" he asked suddenly. "A therapist with your success rate could work anywhere. Why take on a hopeless case like me?" Sarah's hands paused for a moment. "First of all, you're not hopeless. And second," she glanced at Emily and smiled. "Let's just say I know what it's like when people tell you something's impossible. Emily's father's family said I'd never manage as a single mother, that I'd never finish my medical training. Sometimes proving people wrong is the best motivation." Across town, Richard Crawford sat in the CEO's office, Nathan's office, acting like he already owned it. He was meeting with the board members, showing them doctored medical reports. "As you can see, gentlemen, my cousin's condition is deteriorating," Richard said smoothly. "The accident affected not just his body but his mind. We need to think about the company's future." One of the older board members frowned. "But the merger with Vandertech, Nathan was against it." "Nathan isn't thinking clearly anymore," Richard replied. "Catherine can confirm this. The merger is our best option now." Back at the hospital, Sarah was pushing Nathan harder than anyone had dared. She had him sitting up in bed, working on upper body exercises. "I know it hurts," she said firmly when he groaned in pain. "But pain means those muscles are still fighting." Emily brought him a glass of water, her small face serious. "Mama says medicine doesn't always taste good, but that doesn't mean it's not working." Nathan couldn't help smiling. The little girl reminded him of himself at that age, before money and power had complicated everything. "Your daughter's very wise," he told Sarah. "Too wise sometimes," Sarah agreed. "It's just been the two of us since she was 3. We've learned a lot together." As the session continued, neither of them noticed Catherine standing in the doorway, her face dark with anger. She watched Sarah's gentle interactions with Nathan, saw how he responded to her touch, and her jealousy grew. That evening, Catherine met with Richard at their usual expensive restaurant. "She has to go," Catherine declared, stabbing at her salad. "I've worked too hard to let some physical therapist ruin everything." Richard sipped his wine thoughtfully. "The timing's tricky. We need Nathan distracted while we push through the merger documents. Maybe this Sarah person could be useful. Keep him occupied while we handle the business end." "No," Catherine's voice was firm. "I've seen how he looks at her. And that child, they're becoming too close. Call your contacts at the medical board. I want her license investigated." But Catherine's schemes were about to face an unexpected obstacle. Sarah wasn't just helping Nathan's body heal. She was awakening his fighting spirit. During their evening session, while Emily did her homework nearby, Nathan finally asked the question that had been bothering him. "The helicopter crash, something wasn't right. The maintenance records disappeared right after the accident." Sarah's hands stilled on his shoulders. "What are you saying?" "I think..." Nathan lowered his voice. "I think Catherine and Richard wanted this to happen. The merger I was fighting against, it would have made them both very rich. Sarah looked into his eyes, seeing the pain of betrayal there. Then we need proof, and you need to get stronger, fast. Why are you willing to help me? Nathan asked. This could be dangerous. Sarah thought about her own struggles, about the years of fighting to be taken seriously in her profession, because sometimes the people who seem to have everything are the ones who need help the most. Emily looked up from her books and smiled at them both. And Mama always says helping people is the right thing to do, even when it's hard. As night fell over the city, 3 different plans were taking shape. In her luxury apartment, Catherine was making calls to destroy Sarah's career. In the Crawford building, Richard was forging documents to seize control of the company. And in a quiet hospital room, a broken man was finding his strength again, helped by 2 people who asked nothing of him except that he try. The next morning would bring new challenges. Dr. Harrison had called an emergency meeting with the hospital board to question Sarah's methods. Catherine had arranged for reporters to discover some disturbing allegations about Sarah's past. And Richard was preparing to present the merger documents to the board. But they had all underestimated the power of genuine care over greed, of real love over manipulation. As Sarah packed up her therapy supplies for the night, she didn't know she was about to become the center of a storm that would shake the foundations of the Crawford empire. Emily hugged Nathan goodbye, something she did every evening now. See you tomorrow, Mr. Nathan. Don't forget to do your exercises. Watching them leave, Nathan felt stronger than he had since the accident. Not just in his body, but in his spirit. For the first time, he had people in his corner who weren't interested in his money or his power. He reached for his phone and made a call he should have made weeks ago. Max, it's Nathan. Remember that security firm you recommended? I need them to look into something. Start with the helicopter maintenance logs from the day of my accident. The pieces were being set for a showdown that would change everyone's lives. And at the center of it all was a woman who had walked into his hospital room with nothing but determination and hope, unknowingly setting in motion events that would expose the worst of human greed and the best of human love. The morning. Newspapers hit the stands with explosive headlines, questions raised about Crawford's miracle therapist, and controversial past of Nathan Crawford's new caregiver revealed. Catherine's plan was working perfectly. Sarah arrived at the hospital to find security guards waiting for her. Miss Mitchell, you'll need to speak with the board immediately, one of them said. In the hospital boardroom, Dr. Harrison sat with a group of stern-faced administrators. He held up a file. Miss Mitchell, we've received some disturbing reports about your practice in West Virginia. It seems there were complaints about your unconventional methods. Sarah stood tall, her hands steady. Those complaints were filed by doctors who didn't like that their patients chose my traditional treatments over their expensive procedures. Every complaint was investigated and dismissed. Nevertheless, Dr. Harrison continued, we feel it would be best if you took a leave of absence while we... No, the voice came from the doorway. Nathan was there in his wheelchair, looking stronger than he had in weeks. Sarah Mitchell stays, or I'll have my lawyers here within the hour. And trust me, they'll be very interested in reviewing all the hospital's recent decisions about my care. Emily, who had been waiting quietly in the hallway, ran to hug her mother. See, Mama, I told you Mr. Nathan wouldn't let the mean people hurt you. Back in Nathan's room, Sarah finally let her brave face slip. They're not going to stop, are they? Catherine and the others? Nathan took her hand. The touch sent warmth through both of them. No, they won't. But I have something they don't know about. Before the crash, I hid copies of all the real merger documents. They prove that Vandertech is nearly bankrupt and Catherine's father is trying to use my company to cover his losses. Where are these documents? Sarah asked. In a safe place, but I need to be stronger before I can get to them. He looked at her with determination. How soon can you have me ready to stand? Sarah studied him professionally, but her heart was racing at his touch. With intense therapy, maybe 2 weeks. But Nathan, it will be harder than anything you've done so far. Emily, who was arranging her stuffed animals on Nathan's bed, looked up. You can do it, Mr. Nathan. Mama always says the hardest things are the most worth doing. While they planned Nathan's recovery, Catherine and Richard were meeting with Vandertech's board. Catherine's father, Henry Vanderbilt, dominated the room with his presence. The merger must happen within the month, Henry demanded. Before anyone discovers the truth about our finances. Richard nodded eagerly. Nathan's condition is deteriorating rapidly. Once he's declared incompetent, I'll have full control. But Catherine wasn't as confident. That therapist is becoming a problem. Nathan's getting stronger, not weaker, and the way he looks at her. Then it's time for more drastic measures, Henry declared. Richard, make the call. That evening, as Sarah and Emily were leaving the hospital, two men in suits approached them in the parking lot. Miss Mitchell, we're from Child Protective Services, one said. We've received concerning reports about your daughter's living situation. Sarah pulled Emily close. What reports? Who filed them? Anonymous complaint, the man said smoothly. Given your work schedule and questionable background, we'll need to evaluate Emily's placement. Emily clung to her mother, tears in her eyes. Mama, I don't want to go anywhere. This is ridiculous, Sarah said firmly. My daughter is well cared for. You can check with her school, her doctors. Nevertheless, we'll need to schedule a home visit soon. The threat in his voice was clear. When Sarah returned to Nathan's room the next morning, her eyes were red from crying all night. Nathan took one look at her face and knew something was wrong. Tell me, he said softly. As Sarah explained about the CPS visit, Nathan's face darkened with anger. Catherine's behind this. She's using Emily to get to you. I can't risk losing my daughter, Sarah whispered. Maybe I should just quit, find another job somewhere far away. No, Nathan's voice was firm. We fight back. Together. He pressed the call button for his nurse. Get my lawyer on the phone. Now. Within hours, Nathan's legal team was working to protect Emily and Sarah, but they all knew it was just the beginning. Catherine and her allies would keep coming at them from every angle. During their afternoon therapy session, while Emily napped on the room's small sofa, Nathan surprised Sarah by asking, "Why do you really stay? It would be easier to walk away." Sarah's hands paused on his shoulders. Because for the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Emily adores you and I... She stopped, afraid to say more. Nathan reached up and touched her cheek. And you? Before she could answer, Catherine burst into the room. She took in the intimate scene before her with blazing eyes. Well, isn't this cozy? She sneered. I wonder what the medical board would think about a therapist getting so personal with her patient. Sarah stepped back, but Nathan grabbed her hand. Get out, Catherine. Your games aren't working anymore. Games? Catherine laughed coldly. Oh, darling, you haven't seen anything yet. By the way, Sarah, I heard Child Protective Services is very thorough in their investigations. It would be a shame if they found something concerning. After Catherine left, Sarah sank into a chair, shaking. She's not going to stop. Then we need to move faster, Nathan said. Those documents I told you about, they're in a safe deposit box at First National Bank. I need to be able to get there in person to access them. Sarah looked at him thoughtfully. The doctors said you needed at least another month of therapy before attempting to stand. What do you think? I think, Sarah smiled for the first time that day. I think it's time to show everyone what you're really capable of. That night, after Emily was safely asleep at home with a trusted neighbor watching her, Sarah returned to the hospital. She brought extra supplies, herbs from her grandmother's recipes, special exercises she rarely used. This won't be easy, she warned Nathan. And it will hurt. Nathan set his jaw. I don't care about the pain. Catherine threatened your daughter. That makes this personal. For hours, they worked harder than ever before. Nathan pushed through pain that would have stopped him days ago. Sarah used every technique she knew, traditional and modern. Finally, as midnight approached, Sarah helped Nathan move to the edge of the bed. Ready? He gripped her shoulders. Both of them felt the electricity of the touch, but stayed focused on the task. Slowly, shakily, Nathan Crawford stood on his own feet. He managed 3 steps before his legs gave out, and Sarah caught him. They ended up close together, breathing hard, their faces inches apart. Thank you, Nathan whispered. For what? For believing in me when everyone else gave up. The moment was interrupted by a night nurse entering the room. Sarah quickly helped Nathan back to bed, but both of them knew something had changed. The line between therapist and patient had blurred, replaced by something deeper and more dangerous. As Sarah drove home that night, she didn't notice the black car following her. In his office, Richard Crawford was making a late-night phone call. It's time to move to phase 2. The therapist is becoming a real problem. The storm Catherine had promised was about to break, but she hadn't counted on one thing: the power of 2 hearts united against adversity, and the strength of a little girl's faith in both of them. Sarah woke up to pounding on her front door. When she opened it, 2 police officers stood there with stern faces. Miss Mitchell, we have a warrant to search your home, one officer said. We received an anonymous tip about stolen prescription. Medications. Sarah's heart stopped. Emily, honey, she called out. Go to Mrs. Rodriguez next door right now. As Emily ran out the back door, the officers began searching the house. In the kitchen, one of them held up a bottle triumphantly. Look what we have here. Sarah stared at the prescription bottle in horror. That's not mine. Someone planted that. Across town, Catherine was having breakfast with Richard when her phone buzzed. She smiled as she read the message. Right about now our little problem is being taken care of. But Catherine's smile faded when her next message came through. The police had found Sarah's medical license and legitimate prescriptions for all her natural medicines. The planted evidence was too obvious. The officers apologized and left. How dare they mess this up? Catherine slammed her coffee cup down. Do I have to do everything myself? At the hospital, Nathan was working harder than ever. Sarah had him standing for longer periods, taking more steps. Emily would count them out loud, cheering every time he made it further. 14 steps today, Emily announced proudly. That's 3 more than yesterday. Nathan smiled at her enthusiasm, but he could see the worry in Sarah's eyes. What happened this morning? You seem shaken. Sarah told him about the police raid. Nathan's face darkened with anger. This has gone too far. We need those documents. Now, you're not strong enough for a long trip yet, Sarah protested. We don't have a choice anymore, Nathan replied. They're going after your daughter. Richard's called an emergency board meeting for next week. Once they declare me incompetent, we lose everything. That night they made their plans. Sarah would take Nathan to the bank first thing in the morning, before Catherine or Richard knew what was happening. But someone was watching. A security guard Catherine had bribed called her as soon as he overheard them. Catherine immediately called Richard. Tomorrow morning, the bank. Stop them whatever it takes. The next morning started like any other. Sarah arrived early with Emily, who was excited about their secret mission. But as they helped Nathan into Sarah's car, 2 black SUVs screeched into the parking lot. 4 men in suits jumped out. Mr. Crawford, one called out, we're here to escort you back to your room, doctor's orders. Run, Nathan whispered to Sarah. She jumped into the driver's seat, but one of the men grabbed Emily's arm. Mama! Emily cried out. Sarah's heart nearly stopped, but then something amazing happened. Nathan Crawford, the man who supposedly couldn't walk, stood up from his wheelchair. Using the car for support, he took 3 strong steps and pushed the man away from Emily. Don't you dare touch her, he shouted. Everyone froze in shock. Emily ran to Nathan, who managed to stay standing, holding onto the car with one hand and Emily with the other. That's impossible, one of the men said. You're supposed to be paralyzed. Sarah helped Nathan and Emily into the car, and they sped away. In the rearview mirror, she could see the men scrambling back to their vehicles. They'll follow us, Nathan said through gritted teeth. The effort of standing had drained him. Let them, Sarah replied with a determined smile. I grew up in these streets. They don't know the shortcuts I do. Emily bounced excitedly in the back seat. This is just like in the movies. After a series of sharp turns through narrow alleys, they lost their pursuers. 20 minutes later, they pulled up at First National Bank. We made it, Sarah said, relieved. But their problems weren't over. Inside the bank, they found Catherine waiting with 2 security guards. Her face was twisted with rage when she saw Nathan standing, leaning on Sarah, but definitely not helpless. Stop them, Catherine shrieked. He's not in his right mind. That woman's manipulating him. But Nathan spoke up, his voice carrying through the bank lobby. Catherine Vanderbilt, you're about to be exposed for what you really are. He turned to the bank manager. I'm Nathan Crawford and I need access to my safe deposit box now. The manager looked nervously between Nathan and Catherine. Sir, we've been instructed that you're not competent to. Check your records, Nathan interrupted. Only I have access to this box. Not my fiancé, not my cousin, just me. And I'm here, standing on my own 2 feet, with full documentation proving my identity. Catherine's face went pale. She knew what was in that box, proof of everything she and Richard had done. While the manager verified Nathan's identity, Emily tugged on Catherine's expensive skirt. You're not a very nice person, she said simply. Catherine looked down at the child with contempt, but Emily didn't flinch. My mama says mean people are just scared inside. What are you scared of? Before Catherine could respond, the bank manager returned with Nathan's safe deposit box. Nathan pulled out a thick folder of documents. It's over, Catherine, he said. The real Vandertech financial reports, proof of the bribes you and Richard paid. Even a copy of the maintenance log showing the helicopter was sabotaged. Catherine's composure finally cracked. "You don't understand. Daddy's company was failing. This merger was our only chance to save it. Everything I did for my family." "Family?" Sarah spoke up. "You tried to destroy an innocent man. You threatened my daughter. That's not family, that's just greed." Security guards, real ones this time, arrived to escort Catherine out. As she was led away, she turned back one last time. "You'll regret this, Nathan. You're nothing without me." But Nathan wasn't listening. He was too busy hugging Emily, who was telling everyone who would listen how brave he had been, and Sarah was looking at him with something more than pride in her eyes. Later that afternoon, safe in Nathan's hospital room, they watched the news reports roll in. Catherine and Richard were under investigation. The merger was cancelled. Nathan's board was calling an emergency meeting to reinstate him as CEO. "We did it," Sarah said softly, sitting beside his bed. Emily had fallen asleep in the chair by the window. "No," Nathan replied, taking her hand. "You did it. You believed in me when everyone else saw a broken man. You taught me to fight again." "Nathan," Sarah started, but he put a finger to her lips. "Let me finish. I'm not broken anymore, Sarah. Thanks to you, I'm stronger than I've ever been. And not just physically." He pulled her closer, and this time there was no interruption, no crisis to stop what both of them had been feeling for weeks. Their first kiss was soft, gentle, full of promise. Emily stirred in her chair and opened her eyes. Instead of being surprised, she just smiled. "Finally! I was wondering when you two would figure it out." But their moment of happiness was interrupted by an urgent knock at the door. Dr. Harrison burst in, his face grave. "You need to see this," he said, turning on the TV. Breaking news scrolled across the screen. Catherine Vanderbilt had escaped police custody, and she'd left behind a note. "If I can't have the company, no one will." The next morning, every TV station in the city was talking about Catherine's escape. Police cars were parked outside the hospital, and security guards patrolled every floor. "I don't like this," Sarah said, pacing in Nathan's room. "Catherine's not just angry anymore, she's desperate." Nathan watched her from his bed, worried more about Sarah and Emily's safety than his own. "Maybe you two should go stay somewhere else for a while. I have a beach house in—" "No." Sarah stopped pacing and took his hand. "We're not leaving you. Whatever Catherine's planning, we face it together." Emily looked up from her homework. "Besides, Mama always says running away doesn't solve problems." Just then, Richard burst into the room, looking pale and scared. "Nathan, you have to help me. Catherine's lost her mind." "Why should we trust you?" Sarah demanded, stepping between Richard and Nathan. "Because," Richard held up his phone, "she just sent me this." The message showed photos of documents, evidence of every illegal thing Richard had done to help Catherine. Below the photos was a simple threat. "The police get these at midnight unless you do exactly what I say." Nathan studied his cousin's terrified face. "What does she want?" "She wants me to call an emergency board meeting. Today. She says if Nathan doesn't sign over the company to her, she'll release evidence that will destroy everyone, including proof that Sarah was selling illegal medications." "That's a lie," Sarah protested. "Catherine doesn't care about the truth anymore," Nathan said grimly. "She just wants revenge." Emily, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Mr. Nathan, remember what you said about the secret room?" Nathan's eyes widened. "Emily, you're a genius!" He turned to Sarah. "The Crawford building has a hidden executive bunker from the Cold War. My father showed it to me when I was a kid. It's where we kept our most sensitive documents." "And?" Sarah asked. "And Catherine doesn't know about it. But I bet that's where she's hiding. It's the perfect place to access the company's systems and destroy everything." Richard looked confused. "How would she even get in? That building's surrounded by police." "Because," Nathan said, "she must have had help. Someone who's been working there for years. Someone who's desperate to save himself." He looked pointedly at Richard, who squirmed under his gaze. "Okay, fine," Richard confessed. "I gave her my access card, but I didn't think she'd actually use it. She said it was just insurance." Nathan pressed the call button for his nurse. "Get me my clothes. Sarah, help me up. It's time to end this." "You can't be serious," Sarah protested. "You're not strong enough for this." But Nathan was already standing, stronger than ever, thanks to Sarah's treatments. "Catherine thinks she's going to destroy everything I care about. She doesn't realize. She already gave me something priceless. She showed me who my real family is." He looked at Sarah and Emily with such love that Sarah felt tears in her eyes. "All right," she said, "but we do this my way, safe and smart." Within an hour, they had a plan. Richard would enter the building first, telling the police he needed to get some documents. Sarah would go in through the service entrance. She still had her therapy provider ID badge. Nathan would wait in a car nearby with Emily, coordinating everything by phone. But Emily had other ideas. "I want to help. I'm small. I can fit in places grown-ups can't." "Absolutely not," Sarah said firmly. But then she remembered something. "Although, Nathan, doesn't the bunker have a ventilation system?" Nathan nodded slowly. "Yes, and the controls are in a small maintenance room. Emily could reach them easily." "No," Sarah cut him off. "It's too dangerous." Emily took her mother's hand. "Mama, remember when you told me sometimes we have to be brave to help people we love? I love you, and I love Mr. Nathan too. Please let me help." Sarah looked at her daughter, suddenly seeing not just her baby girl, but a brave young person who understood more than anyone realized. Finally, she nodded. "But you stay with Nathan until we need you. Promise?" "Promise." Everything was set. As evening fell, their plan went into action. Richard entered the building first, talking loudly to the police about needing files. While everyone was distracted, Sarah slipped in through the back. Nathan and Emily waited in a car across the street, watching everything through the building's security cameras on Nathan's laptop. They could see Sarah making her way to the basement and Richard heading to his office on the top floor. "Catherine's got to be in the bunker," Nathan said. "The system shows power being used down there." Then everything went wrong. The security cameras suddenly went dark. Nathan's phone rang. It was Catherine. "I can see you out there, darling," she said sweetly. "Did you really think I wouldn't have my own people in the security office? By the way, Sarah just walked into a trap. In about 2 minutes, the basement will fill with gas from a conveniently broken pipe. Nothing lethal, just enough to keep her quiet while I finish my work." Nathan's blood ran cold. "Catherine, stop this madness." "Madness? No, this is justice. You chose that woman over me. Now you can watch while I take everything from you, just like you took everything from me." The line went dead. Nathan looked at Emily, seeing the fear in her eyes. "Emily," he said gently, "I know I promised your mother I'd keep you safe, but right now, she needs you. Those ventilation controls, they can stop the gas and save your mama. Can you be brave?" Emily sat up straight, her chin high, just like her mother's. "I'm always brave, just like Mama taught me." While Catherine was focused on the basement and Richard was creating a distraction upstairs, Nathan helped Emily reach a side entrance. He'd never felt so helpless, watching this little girl walk into danger. But Emily didn't hesitate. She disappeared into the building just as police sirens filled the air. Catherine's revenge was about to backfire in a way she never expected, because she never understood that real strength comes in all sizes, and real love gives even the smallest hero the courage to face the biggest fears. Inside the dark building, a little girl crawled through maintenance tunnels, guided by Nathan's voice on a tiny earpiece, racing to save her mother. Above her, Richard faced his moment of truth, and below, Sarah Mitchell was about to discover just how far Catherine Vanderbilt would go to destroy the happiness she couldn't have. Sarah knew something was wrong the moment she smelled the gas. She tried to run back to the stairs, but the heavy security doors had all locked automatically. Through the basement windows, she could see Catherine in the bunker, typing frantically at a computer. "Catherine!" Sarah pounded on the bulletproof glass. "You'll kill us both!" Catherine looked up with a cold smile. "Oh, you'll just take a little nap, long enough for me to destroy everything Nathan loves, starting with his precious company's reputation." Upstairs, Richard stood in his office, staring at his phone. Catherine had sent him another message. "Almost done. The files are uploading to every major news outlet. By morning, the Crawford name will be ruined." His hands shook as he thought about Nathan's kindness when they were kids, before money and jealousy poisoned everything. Making his decision, he dialed 911. "This is Richard Crawford. I need to... everything to save not just me, but my whole company. I know there will never be a better time." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as Nathan opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful diamond ring. "Sarah Mitchell, you saw me at my worst and helped me become my best. You and Emily aren't just the women who saved my life. You're the family I always dreamed of having. Will you marry me?" Emily bounced excitedly. "Say yes, Mama. Say yes." But before Sarah could answer, a shout came from the building entrance. Catherine had broken free from the officers during her transfer. She was running toward them, her face twisted with hatred. reaching into her jacket for something that glinted in the morning light. The next few seconds would change everything. A mother's instinct, a child's scream, a man's desperate lunge, and a sound that shattered the dawn's peace, a gunshot that would test their newfound happiness in ways none of them could have imagined.